Okay, so going back to your experience when you're saying, right, that all the things that we have right now, you didn't have it back then, or the new skills and any all those type of things. So what are the new skills that came up in your experience as a journalist, in this major?
One of the biggest changes is going from being a specialist to being a generalist. What I mean by that is I started in television news. A news team that would go out to report a news story would consist of a camera person, a deck operator, an audio technician, a reporter, and an assistant reporter, okay, for just a little story. Now, my friend Dean Meminger goes out by himself with his own camera and does everything. So he's a generalist in the sense that he's not just a reporter anymore. He's not just a camera person. He's not just an editor, okay? But he's a generalist. He has to know a lot about a lot of different areas. So in the days of the old television networks, you would have a situation where someone would say, well, I'm a studio camera person and that's all I do. That's not true anymore, okay? You may go from being a studio camera person to editing on something else, or assisting in a movie set somewhere else on the technical side. And the same thing's true on the side of journalism. It's really, there's no general anchor people anymore. Most reporters now, in addition to doing general assignment reporting, have to have a specialty, whether it's health news, financial reporting, education, and they become specialists in that, but at the same time, they have a general understanding and are able to do all of the elements. So you have a great downsizing on one side, where you went from a 5-person crew to a 1-person crew, but if you look at it a different way, now you have 5 crews instead of 1. So that, I think, is one of the biggest changes on how the technology has changed the way news is disseminated. And the other is the amount of news. Like I said before, we had 3 channels, essentially, that did news in the early 60s when I was a little kid. Now there are literally hundreds of news channels available. So the specialties that those networks can get into are tremendous. They can be specialists on nothing but home improvement, or specialists on entertainment, or specialists on finance. So in that sense, you have it getting more specific. But the individuals who are reporting the news have to be more skilled in more areas.
Do you think this is good or bad?
I think it's inevitable. And whether I think it's good or bad, or you think it's good or bad, first of all, it's going to happen. But secondly, what we can do is try and bring journalistic values and different journalistic values and ethical issues and our own ethics into it to report it, regardless of the technology, in the best way that's good for the public.
Your last question. Okay. Where do you see journalism in the future? In general, or?
I don't think we can see journalism in the future more than 2 or 3 years out, because the technology that exists now didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. For example, one of the best sources that journalists that I know use today to get quick information about a person that they learned about in a news tip is on Facebook. And Facebook didn't exist more than 5 years ago. So Facebook has changed journalism, okay? Most of the news that got out about an attack on a hotel in India a year and a half ago, almost all the visuals that were reported to the international public as well as Indian news channels in India was from Twitter. From Twitter and from other photo sites where people were distributing the information from their smartphones. Okay, not from reporters, but from citizens who were reporting. We're going to see that to continue to trend based on the technology and on citizen journalists, okay, who take it upon themselves to use the technology they have to send a tip into a website or to a radio station, which will still be around, or something like that.
You mentioned this right now. How reliable is that to actually just get information from people like Twitter, from Facebook, or other media sources like that?
That's a good question, and part of the reason it's not going to be that much of an issue is that there will always be authoritative sources and sources that you can trust. Okay, The New York Times isn't going to go away. It may not be on paper, okay, but it's always going to be a credible political source, okay, as opposed to JohnDoe.com, who's reporting from the ground, in his community. Do you listen to both? Maybe. Does one sound less credible than the other? Probably. Then do your research, follow up on it, okay? If this guy is saying this crime was committed, you can find out from other sources as well, because there are so many sources. So the credibility is something that you can always trust, okay? Should you trust the National Enquirer to the same degree that you trust the Wall Street Journal? Probably not. But most people know what kind of stories you get from the Enquirer, and even if you like reading it, you don't take it with the same value that you would take something from a Time magazine. Okay, so that's always an individual judgment that people will have to make on their own, regardless of the source. There are still people that think Elvis is alive. Okay, and there are still people that think that President Obama is a Muslim, or he wasn't born in the United States. Mm-hmm. Okay, who is saying that, and what's the source? And consider that when you consume your news.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
Yeah.